So good evening, everybody. Let me introduce the company. We're an AIM-listed company. Currently market cap's around 65, 70 million. Our primary focus is on developing and commercializing a pharmaceutical product, a brand name of Ferrocru or Acrifa. It's a product for the treatment of iron deficiency. It's an oral product. It's approved for commercialization in the US and Europe. We have patent protection until 2035. And in Europe and in China, we've already out-licensed the product to Norgine in Europe and a company in China called ASK Pharm. We have a development pipeline. The iron deficiency product is currently in a phase 3 pediatric study, which will allow us to expand the usage. It's currently approved for adults, but not children. We also have another product called PT20, which is a phosphate binder. We're what we call a semi-virtual company, in as much as we've only got about 15 employees with considerable experience, but we outsource the heavy lifting of things like clinical trials, manufacturing, and in Europe and China, we've outsourced the commercialization. So what are the investment highlights? Well, the current valuation is underpinned by the license deals that we've already done in Europe and China. And there's a very substantial valuation upside from the US opportunity. Ferrocru and Acrifa, as I'll come to in a minute, is novel and it's oral and it's got a very broad indication. So it's for the treatment of all iron deficiency in adults, whether people have got anemia or not, and it's not restricted to a particular disease area or anything like that. And Acrifa will be launched in the US. I think the market capitalization at the moment suggests that the market perhaps thinks for some reason it won't be, but we will either launch the product through a commercialization out-license arrangement, or we will launch the product ourselves. So that's why we say there is a significant valuation upside. So how is the product distinguished from the competitors? Iron deficiency is fundamentally a problem either through problems absorbing iron in the diet, or through bleeding for a variety of reasons, which can come from diseases or other reasons. A very large part of the market is through the first line treatment is through the use of oral iron. They're oral iron salts. And because they're salts, they dissociate quite quickly and they are poorly tolerated. But the vast majority of prescriptions are for oral products. If you can't tolerate oral products, and a high proportion of patients can't, then if you're severely iron deficient and you're anemic, then your second line option is to go for intravenous treatment. And intravenous treatment is effective, but it has significant inconvenience because you have to go into hospital. There's a risk of anaphylactic shock. So you have to go into hospital where they have resuscitation facilities available. That's clearly inconvenient. It adds the hospital cost and so on to the cost of treatment, the cost of the drug. So the poor tolerability of the existing oral iron therapies and that cost and inconvenience of intravenous iron create a significant unmet need and a commercial opportunity for our product. So why is it novel? Why is it different? Essentially, the iron ion, Fe3+, is surrounded by 3 maltol molecules, and that binding is very tight. And so unlike the other oral iron salts, the product does not dissociate when it is ingested, but it passes through the gut until it gets to the duodenum, which is where iron is mostly absorbed by the body. And if the body needs iron, the body's reaction, the body's demand will overcome the binding of the ferric maltol molecule, and it will strip the iron out of the molecule and absorb it. The residual maltol is essentially a sugar-like substance. It's used in food additives, and so that gets digested easily. And if iron isn't needed, the whole ferric maltol molecule just passes through the body and is digested in the normal way. And one of the important reasons we believe that there's a real place for Ferrocru is demonstrated by our head-to-head study, where we did a comparison with the leading intravenous therapy. And what you can see there is it's a period of 52 weeks, and the y-axis shows the change from baseline in the amount of hemoglobin measured in terms of grams per deciliter in the blood. And what you can see, the red line is the average intravenous product seen in the study, and the blue line is ferric maltol or Ferrocru. And what you can see is over the first 12 weeks, the intravenous is a little bit faster than ferric maltol at restoring hemoglobin levels. But once you get up to the sort of 2.5–3 grams per deciliter increase, which typically is getting patients up to 11 or 12 grams per deciliter in their blood, then you can see that the both ferric maltol and the intravenous product keep the hemoglobin at the same level. But on the intravenous arm, many of the patients who were dosed needed to receive second doses in the first 12 weeks, and a lot of the patients who went further into the study beyond 12 weeks also required further infusions. So that clearly adds cost, it clearly adds inconvenience, which you don't get with Acrifer, where you're taking it just twice a day, morning and evening. As you take a capsule of 30 milligrams of iron content, and you maintain your hemoglobin levels at the right level. And of course, the other aspect for the intravenous patients is that on an individual basis, the red line doesn't look like that, because you increase the hemoglobin, and then if you have a chronic iron deficiency problem, your iron levels and your hemoglobin levels will actually decline over time, and you will become anemic again, and you will need to go back in and reinfused. So if you look at that red line for individual patients, you actually see something more like a roller coaster. So in terms of positioning of Ferrocru or Acrifer, where we see it and where our partners see it is as a probably initially for patients who fail on the oral iron treatments, and as I said, there is a high percentage of patients who do, rather than going straight onto an intravenous option, why not take Ferrocru? Because that is seen, as we've just seen on the last slide, virtually as effective as intravenous in terms of restoring iron levels, but in terms of maintaining iron levels over a longer period of time, it probably has some advantages over the intravenous product. And we believe in time, as the credibility of the product grows, doctors will prescribe Ferrocru and Acrifer more in the oral space without even necessarily wanting to try the old oral salts, which are known to have tolerance issues. So we think there's an opportunity to take market from both the oral products, from intravenous products, and actually, as people realize that this is a good, perhaps a better oral product, it will grow the overall market. So let's look specifically at the US opportunity. In the US, something like 10 million patients suffer from iron deficiency anemia across multiple therapeutic areas. You can see the pie chart there of various therapy areas where iron deficiency anemia is seen. There is something in the region of 10 to 11 million oral prescriptions annually, nearly 2.5 million intravenous doses annually. So I think that gives you some indication that this is a broad spread disease with many prescriptions and a big market to go at. Market research shows that there is a significant unmet need. This slide summarizes market research both with physicians and also payers. So this chart at the top right-hand side, prescribers were asked about what they thought of the existing products. And you can see there on a scale of 1 to 7, they reckon that the current branded intravenous products, the more recent ones which are still branded and haven't gone generic, they are seen to be at the moment the more valuable products in the treatment of iron deficiency. And the older generic intravenous products, along with the oral products, are seen as being, they're used, but they're not seen as highly valuable. And then when asked, this is the next chart down, the level of clinical improvement rating, when asked about product X, because it was anonymous with the profile that Acrifer has, the prescribers in the market research said that looks like it would be a very significant increase over what currently exists. And again, that was on a scale of out of 7, and the score was a 6. We've also done market research with payers. That indicates that Acriva would be well accepted, and that a price per pack, which is a month's treatment, a net sales price of something in the region of $200 to $250 per pack is achievable. There are other factors supporting the use of Acriva. I won't dwell on them because of time, but COVID-19 discourages patients and doctors from going into hospital for intravenous therapy. And there's a new class of product called HIF inhibitors, which are aimed at patients who have anemia in chronic kidney disease. And what the nature of HIF inhibitors is that they're designed to improve the amount of absorption of iron. But the key point is you still require iron. So if you're iron deficient, then you are likely to still need iron therapy. HIF inhibitors are oral products. So the question would be, if you're treating your patient with an oral HIF inhibitor and they need iron, why would you send them into hospital for the intravenous iron when you could give them an oral product such as Acriva? So our US commercialization options are either to out-license to a third party or to launch the product ourselves. And if we out-license it, we would expect to get a one-off receipt up front. There'd be sales royalties probably in the range of 10% to 25%, with sales milestones depending on when annual sales for the first time hit specified targets. If we launch the product ourselves, clearly we would end up with full control and full ownership of the profits. We could potentially bring in 1 or 2 other companies to help us reach many therapeutic areas. And one advantage of launching the product ourselves would be that clearly we would be 100% guaranteed, committed. But you can't guarantee that an out-licensed party will, over the nearly 15 years of patent life we've still got left, remain committed for all that time. So we are currently exploring both out-license possibilities. We've got discussions going on with a number of potential licensed partners, but we're also doing some detailed planning ourselves for launching the product ourselves. In terms of planning for a successful launch, we've brought on board 4 experienced US commercial managers. We have brought them on fixed-term contracts at the minute, but with the intent that if we decide to go down this route, they will become employees. They've got the broad range of experience that we need. They've got lots of years of experience, and they have in fact built up an extensive amount of knowledge of Acriva previously in 2020, because they were actually working for a company which had been seeking to license Acriva. And they are looking at all aspects, planning for a Q2 launch in this year, looking at supply chain, market research, what sales force do we need, market access, that's all about pricing and how you position the product with the payer community, medical affairs, how do you influence the key opinion leaders, and so on, and exploring the potential to sub-license or co-promote, as I mentioned earlier, with 1 or 2 specialists in other therapeutic areas. In terms of the sales and profit potential, on average, we expect patients to take something like 4 to 5 months of Acriva. I mentioned earlier that it would be a $200, $250 net sales price, so you can get to about $1,000 per patient per year. So if, let's say, hypothetically, in year 5, we thought we could get to $200 million of net sales, that effectively requires about 200,000 patients annually, which is a relatively small proportion of the available patients and of the available market. If we were to do that ourselves, there'd be a 90% gross margin, so that'd be 180 million on the 200 hypothetical net sales. We think in around year 5, the cost base is likely to be in the $40 to $45 million range. So there's clearly a very substantial cash generation possible in a single year. If you license the product, assume an average royalty of 20%, that would give you a $40 million royalty without any costs. We do have a liability to Vitra, which is the company that originally owned the intellectual property. So in a license arrangement, we would end up with a net income in this hypothetical year 5 of around $30 million. So a very significant opportunity from the US. Europe and China, very briefly. Licensed Synorgine in Europe, we've got a royalty 25% to 40%, but we have to pay the cost of goods out of that. There are prospective sales milestones. Currently, the product is mainly on the market in Germany, England, and Scandinavia. The sales in Germany and UK, in terms of sales volumes, were up 70% over 2019. And in France, Italy, and Spain, the pricing and reimbursement negotiations are expected in 2021. In China, the product is a little bit further behind. It's not approved, but our Chinese partner there has submitted the new drug application, and we're fairly confident that that is likely to require only one phase 3 study of 12 weeks in 120 patients. So that would suggest that a possibility for approval and launch in 2023, and we're due another $11 million milestone on approval. With the China deal, we get royalties between 10 and 15%, but in that case, ASK is going to pay the cost of goods, and there are sales milestones as well. And if you look at the potentials, those terms, and you think, well, if by 2030 the sales in aggregate from Europe and China rise to $150 to $200 million, which when you think of the market sizes of both of those regions is not great, then the market value that we have today, as I said earlier, is entirely supported by the Europe and China deals. So very briefly on the cash position, we finished last year with 2.9 million of cash. In order to make sure we don't run out of cash in 2021, one of our bigger shareholders, AOP, and Dr. Christian Schweiger, who's also a board member, they offered us loans facilities of around about £4.4 million in total. So they will keep us running if we don't get any cash in from any other sources. And so in summary, the product Ferrocru or Acrifer has unique attributes in efficacy, tolerability, and the breadth of application. Iron deficiency is a very large global market, and the US is no exception to that. We're evaluating both the out-license and the shield-led launch alternatives for the US. We've brought on board the appropriate professional management who can, for the US, who can design, plan, and launch the product. We will reach clarity, I believe, on this during the first quarter of 2021. Our market cap doesn't reflect any value for the US commercialization, and I believe that the announcement of either a license deal or the Shield launch will lead to a rapid re-rating of the share price. So with that, I will come to an end and open it up for questions.
And most questions are around the strategy and the approach to the US. And you mentioned there that maybe the market isn't giving you the value for your opportunity there. And it seems to be about kind of choosing which strategy to go for, whether you go it alone or with someone else. And there seems to be quite a lot of comments about why don't you kind of bite the bullet and go yourself and make the decision. What's the key? What are the key? I guess you probably haven't really said it, but the kind of the key points for you, which will sway you whether to go it yourself, do it yourselves, go alone, or to work with another organisation.
So I think the decision to go alone will partly depend on making sure that we really do have the plans in place. We understand the commitment. Clearly, if we're going to do it ourselves, that is a significant commitment, and we need to make sure that the plans are right and we got everything that fits into place. And that planning work is still being done. We also are going to require something in the region of $30 to $40 million, much of which will finance the launch itself in the US, but also that $30 to $40 million will cover the other Shield costs. We have a pediatric study, which I mentioned, that we need to finance. But we believe that $30 to $40 million would take us to the point where the revenues are exceeding the costs, and therefore, we're starting to become cash generative. And our forecast would suggest that could happen sometime in the first half of next year. So in order to make that decision, we need to see, can we get the finance? Not only are the plans right, but where are we going to get the finance from, and can we get it on terms which are acceptable? So there's a lot of work going on at the moment, looking at that, including looking at a lot of potential debt providers, particularly specialist debt providers. Clearly, on the other hand, we've got to look at the license deals and opportunities which are still on the table, and make a comparison between the two. So, we don't want to jump into one before we really have got the full analysis done.
And on that, a question here which I think is quite good. Would you characterize your US negotiations with potential licensees as strengthened, given your improved understanding of the US market by doing that research on entering it yourselves? Does that help you in that licensee negotiation process?
That is a good question. I think that it is undoubtedly right. We have learned a huge amount over the last 12 to 15 months. If you go back to say the start of the fourth quarter of 2019, the product was approved in July of 2019. We really started license discussions around late September, October time, and we were a company then who had, we had no real experience of the US. So we have spent days and days in meetings with a whole variety of US companies who have told us their thoughts, who brought their own market research and shared some of that with us. We have learned a huge lot, and of course, every bit you learn, you can play back into negotiations. And also, it has informed our own thinking and given us the confidence that we could contemplate launching the product ourselves. I don't think that is, we would not, frankly, I think have known really where to turn had we tried to do this sort of back in the second half of 2019. We've learned a huge amount.
We've got a lot of questions. We don't have very much time, I'm afraid. So I'm going to put two together, and that might be the last one. And the question is, are you happy with Norgene's performance to date? And someone else has asked, would your European partner also be a company you could work with in the States? So I guess they have that hand in hand.
Yeah. So the second part is Norgene don't have a presence in the US, so that doesn't work. In terms of, we think they've done very well in the UK and Germany to grow sales by 70% in volume terms, 2020 over 2019, when you consider the COVID epidemic. Germany, I think, has suffered less than the UK in terms of what has happened to the medical community, and I hope I'm not doing them, I hope I'm not being too simplistic about what happened in Germany, but that's the sense I get from talking to Norgene, that their reps were able to continue to have better access to German doctors than they were in the UK. And in fact, I think they really struggled to get access to doctors in the UK. So we think they've done a pretty good job in a COVID year in growing the sales. In terms of growing beyond the UK and Germany, one of the reasons why the UK and Germany are launched first, typically with pharmaceutical products, is you can set your own prices in those countries. Whereas with the other big European markets, France, Italy, and Spain, you have to go in and negotiate a price and agree that price is going to be reimbursed. That is something where you need to bring health economic arguments to bear. And the health economic arguments behind Acrifa were underpinned, or are underpinned in particular, by the head-to-head study. And as many of the people listening to this call will probably know, if they've been following us, we had a hiatus with the head-to-head study, where we realized in March of 2020 that there were flaws in the original analysis. So we had to go back and reanalyze the data. And that really, stalled Norgene's attempts at that time to prepare their pricing and reimbursement dossiers for negotiation. So, I'm certainly in no position to criticise Norgene for the fact that they're not yet on the market in France, Italy, and Spain, because we brought this problem on ourselves.
Okay. Tim, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and for giving us the update.